Hey everybody, welcome back to week 8 of Getting Psyched for Information Literacy. This week we are going to differentiate about different types of resources between peer-reviewed, which should sound familiar at this point, popular press, and trade journals. So thanks to the University of Southern California, I have this really great chart that's going to be helpful in pointing out some of the differences between the different types of resources. But first I want to go into what is a popular press source. That would be like our magazines and our newspapers, and their main intent is to either entertain or inform the general public. So it's written in a way that's easily understandable. As we can see here, it's written either by a staff writer, a journalist, or a generalist. A newspaper, a columnist, a journalist, or a staff writer. Again, it's written in a way that's pretty easily digestible, and it's meant to inform. If we go down a little bit further, we can see that the intended audience is usually the general public. Sometimes they can be a little bit more specialized, especially when you get into something like the Wall Street Journal. They get into the financial aspects of things, but for the most part, they are intended for general public. But they're also usually pretty short as well. So you know that you can find short articles that you can read pretty easily. I also wanted to point out that for both newspapers and magazines that they are published pretty frequently, monthly, weekly, or weekly, daily, so that leads us into why they tend to be a little bit more brief than some of their counterparts that we'll talk about in a little bit. So typically they don't go beyond a few pages. Generally speaking. And I do have an example of a popular press article here from Time magazine, and it's going into why Instagram is the worst social media for mental health. And you'll see here that they're linking out to different surveys here. Anytime you see a hyperlink, that's them kind of showing their evidence that they're tying in. And as a good researcher, it's always a good idea to open those tabs and kind of see where they're finding this evidence and checking to see if it's a legitimate article, if it's worth looking at. Like this seems pretty, this seems like it's just another advertisement almost. So probably not the best thing for them to be linking out to. So I would definitely, as a researcher, call question to how legitimate that is that they're linking out to that. One thing that you're not going to find in popular press is a list of references that you can check out. They don't cite where you can find additional information. They're just going to link to other stories. They're not going to give you like a bibliography of where they found information. Like I said, if they're giving you any kind of evidence, it's going to be in these in-text citations linking to reports. And then if you're trying to actually find a particular study that they might reference, you might have to do a little hunting down yourself as a researcher. And another thing you can do is check out the author themselves. Again, this is probably a staff writer, but a lot of times they'll put what other types of articles that the writer has done. So as you can see, it looks like this writer does a lot about health, both mental and physical health. So this might be the staff writer on the coverage area of health. So this is called lateral reading, when you're opening additional tabs to find out more about what the story is presenting. But as you can see, going back to this, that it was a pretty short article. It didn't have any kind of peer review process. It would have been reviewed by a single editor, but it did have somebody look at it, but just a single editor, not that intensive peer review process that we talked about earlier. And probably referred to sources in text, but as we saw, there was no formal list at the end. It just started going into other articles that we might have wanted to read. The next thing that I want to look at is what is called trade journals. Trade journals, they are popular when you get into a particular profession where the experts in the profession like to write about particular topics and share it with the community. And the idea is to inform about topics in the profession and new events and products and techniques, and share those ideas, but not in the sense of a scholarly or academic article. So since these are not academic articles, they do not have to go through a peer review process, but rather they're reviewed by an editor and then published in a trade journal. The length can vary. They're not publishing any type of original research, but again, they are just to kind of keep up to date with the professional community. And again, those are called trade journals. So I do have an example of a trade journal article from Psychology Today. So sticking with my theme, I'm talking about social media and making it a positive experience for young users. So again, they are linking out to additional links where I could find evidence for what they're saying. So if I wanted to find out about digital citizenship, I can click and I'm getting a link from commonsense.org. So I want to find out a little bit about commonsense.org, but I could watch a video about digital citizenship. And that's true for each of these links that they incorporate. And a lot of times they will start putting reports in there, so I am getting some kind of, quantitative evidence in there as well. A thing that's different is that a lot of times they will include an actual reference if there's a particular study that they're putting in there. And then we get an actual about the author, and we find out that Natalie is a professor of communication director at the social media lab at Cornell University. So we get a little bit of her credentials and her authority of why she is a person that is skilled to be talking about how social media might, or how we can give it a positive experience for young users. And then lastly, this one probably sounds the most familiar, or hopefully it does, is the scholarly or academic or peer-reviewed. So we've talked about peer review before, but again, it has to go through a much more rigid process, a peer review process, and it can be pulled up here. It can be blind peer reviewed or it can be double blind. Double blind means that both the reviewer and isn't identified and the author isn't identified, and so no one who is being reviewed knows who's reviewing or being reviewed. So there's no room for potential bias there. But like we've talked before, it's important that in these types of articles that all the sources are cited and they have extensive bibliographies so that we can look to see where they're getting all their evidence, where they've gotten all their research, because we remember that research is basically these big conversations that experts have had in the field, and they're sharing these conversations. So anything that happened in the past is the past conversations, and then anything that continues on is the conversation moving forward. And we're just presenting that finding and expanding knowledge, and we're doing that to our scholarly peers. These articles tend to be much lengthier, so they are not published nearly as often. Some journals publish 4 times a year, some maybe only publish once, twice, but it's not nearly as often as the other types of publications that we've looked at today. So these are some considerations of different types of resources that you might come in contact with, and how you should think about them as you use them, and how much time and resources have gone into each one. So if you're treating a popular press article with the same weight as you would a scholarly article, you might want to stop and reconsider, well, the popular press only had one editor look at it, whereas the peer review had to go through multiple reviewers and a much more rigid experience to even be published. And obviously they're giving you all their citations, whereas a popular press article, they're just linking out to things. And even in my example, it wasn't a good link that it linked out to. It was almost just like an advertisement. So things to consider. I did pull up a peer-reviewed article just to show same topic that we were looking at, and hopefully at this point this is starting to look familiar to you, and we can look at the full text and look at it from there. So thanks for watching, and I hope you guys have a good day. Thanks.